Before the colonizers arrived on Nigerian soil, our forefathers engaged primarily in farming as a major occupation and means of sustenance, using crude farm implements. Despite the crude implements used, enough food was produced to feed, and cash crops were used to service a barter system of trade across the Sahara and the Atlantic Ocean. Subsistence agriculture was overwhelmingly dominant on the eve of European colonial rule in Nigeria. In this enterprise, food production featured prominently, and there was self-sufficiency in the food supply. Major crops included beans, rice, sesame, cashew nuts, cassava, cocoa beans, groundnuts, gum arabic, kola nuts, maize, melon, millet, palm kernels, palm oil, plantains, rubber, soybeans, bananas, and yams.
People's Club of Nigeria, People's Club of
With the country's vast agricultural resources and a large expanse of arable land, well-distributed rainfall, and warm temperature all year round, agriculture played a progressive role in serving as the major source of livelihood in the country's population. The present food crisis in Nigeria, therefore, could be traced, at least in part, to British colonialism, which changed the focus and objective of production away from food. Prior to this period, there was enough food for the Nigerian people. The incentive created by the demand for raw materials made the local population inadvertently complacent about food production, and there was not enough food for accumulation and export. Following the emphasis on cash crop production by the colonial agricultural policy, land hitherto used for food cultivation was diverted to cash crop production. The neglect of the agricultural sector and almost total dependence on oil export has been a disaster for the country's economy. If Nigeria had held on to its market share in palm oil, cocoa, groundnut, and cotton, it would be earning today at least $10 billion per year from these commodities. Agriculture is one of the pillars and most vital production sectors in any nation's economy. This is why the Tertiary Education Trust Fund has deemed it necessary to make it one of the focal intervention points in its research and development paradigm shift. Professor Suleiman Elias Bogoro, the Executive Secretary of TETFund, insists that agricultural research provides information for policymakers and funding agencies. It also provides transfer of research-induced technology to farmers, which is the only way to measure research benefits to society. Agricultural Research Impact Study also provides feedback to scientists on which technologies or technology components are successful at farm levels.
The TETFund Research and Development Standing Committee that addresses agriculture in the largest context, as you would understand, including food security, of course, overall, the food security, food science and technology specifically, very, very important, fisheries, aquaculture, they are all embedded there.
TETFund is investing heavily in the development of livestock agriculture through its centers of excellence and other R&D initiatives. Livestock agriculture is concerned with raising and maintaining livestock primarily for the purpose of producing meat, milk, and eggs. Livestock agriculture also includes wool and leather production. An example of how strategic this subsector is can be seen when one examines the numbers. Livestock and livestock products generated from $87 billion to $96 billion annually. That is 46 to 48% of U.S. cash receipts from farming markets between 1995 and 1998 alone. Nigeria can reap even greater cash receipts from these if only it can fully harness and modernize as well as scale up its livestock industry.
When you have genetic resources that is valuable, it's regarded as a national asset. Be it crop, be it animal, be it anything. That is why till tomorrow, even people that are novice in agriculture will be hearing about Austin Friesian breed of cattle. Friesian breed because it's producing milk. It takes the Americans to actually develop that more than 100 years. Today we have technology that can give you that same feat. You can achieve it within 10 years or 5 years. Are you getting it now? Biodiversity or conservation, as the case may be, is telling you that you don't just eat everything. There are genetic resources that has to be safeguarded, that has to be regarded as national asset and should be kept somewhere. As of today, part of our challenge when it comes to the animal sector or the livestock component of our national life is that we have lost the genetic resources. There's an ongoing genetic erosion. Without mitigation, I'll give you an example. You will see a red Sokoto goat that is in the north or indigenous to the north. Somebody bought it in Lagos or in the southwest or in the east. The next thing is that you're going to see that particular goat crossing the black local goats. At the end of the day, nobody monitors what happened. And if you check, for the past 2 decades, the size of animals that you have, naturally, without anybody using any scientific intervention, compared to what you have in terms of size of animal today, are they the same thing? Why is it that our goats are looking like big rabbits now? Why do we have cows that cannot be competitive in terms of sizes with their colleagues? Why is it that an average size of an animal that will be slaughtered in the US is about a ton, 1,000 kilogram, and the highest you have over here is 250 and 300? That's why they call your cows, the so-called cows there, they call them big goats. And it's because the way we have messed up a lot of places in the environment, we have messed up the internal environment of these animals because there are no conservation. The elite animals that you will have selected that, hey, this animal is looking exceptionally good. The next thing we're going to do to that particular animal is that we are going to slaughter it and eat it. No conservation. We have not taken any of these genetic resources and go and keep somewhere that if we kill this one today and we eat it, we can regenerate this particular animal.
And this is where I give commendation to our former Minister of Agriculture, Dr. Adeshina. I worked under him for about 4 years. There was a lot of emphasis on value addition because most often we produce the raw products and then we export these products outside, and then they add value to the products and then bring it back and sell these products at very high cost, to us. So and it's one of the issues that we are looking at under the Agri Group, value addition. And if we do that, I think we can save a lot of foreign exchange instead of taking the raw products out and then, losing out in terms of adding value to the raw materials to get the final products.
Meat products represent 49.8% of non-metro food processing employment and 1 of 16 rural manufacturing jobs. Finally, meat, dairy products, and eggs are important components of the Nigerian diet. Proof that you can't go wrong with livestock.
When we talk about agriculture, with the agriculture of flora and fauna, the plant and the animals. And in each of them, there are species and breed varieties for livestock. It's a different species, of course, as it were. And that leads to, and the involvement of research that produces what you call differences between the breeds for livestock, as it were. And there are commodity sub-aggregations. For instance, you talk about beef production, you talk about dairy, and then we talk about the products, animal products, even from a dairy industry. The same thing with the beef industry, as it were. And of course, poultry, that's another major. We can go on and on. We talk about fisheries. So each of these, it requires injection of science, technology, and innovation.
TETFund is applying the triple helix model, bringing the government, the academia, and the industry together with the aim of transforming Nigeria's agriculture value chain.
The key solution will really be what I said, strengthening the capacity of the universities and research institutes to actually work directly with the industry so that the products of their research can be commercialized. That really is the problem. It's not that we don't have the indigenous knowledge of transforming these products, but the fact is that we must realize that we are also competing globally. And as long as we depend on food importation, I think prior to COVID, this country must be spending close to $10 billion annually importing foods. And many of these things, many of these foods we can produce locally. But if we produce them, the products may even turn out to be more expensive than the imported products, again because of the issue of economies of scale. So the real thing to do is to encourage this type of intervention that TETFund is doing, so that gradually we begin really to develop the local capacity to produce, in my own area, these food products. The food multinationals should be encouraged to work with the universities so that the products that are developed by the universities are taken up by the food multinationals and promoted. Because at times, it's just really the marketing that makes the difference. But if we work towards this kind of intervention that the TETFund is promoting, and institutions can really be empowered to move on, like I said, from beyond the bench scale to pilot plant production, so that indeed the food industries can adopt whatever product that we produce. In that way, the products are consumed locally, and before we know it, we'll be able to meet the international standards.
Crop agriculture in Nigeria is constrained every year by challenges such as population growth, climate change, inadequate management practices, unfair price of produces, and insufficient investment in research and development. Recently, conflict and insecurity have added a new dimension to the emerging threats. For this reason, TETFund's R&D intervention strategy takes defense and internal security into consideration, not only in and of itself, but as a panacea to food security in Nigeria. Technology is also a problem that is being vigorously tackled by TETFund.
Within the agri research system, When the Research Council started in 2006, one of the things we did foremost was to look at what are the technologies that are available within the system. And we identified about 216 technologies. And we put that, and it was a very comprehensive work, into a compendium of the technologies available. And that cut across biological, mechanical, management technologies that are available, that are on the shelf. And that was done for a period of 12 years, from 1999 to 2008. And subsequently, there was a second volume that also looked at technologies developed between 2008 and 2018. And this is the second compendium. So if we have this information, what we can do now is take the information and look at the technologies that are there that are either obsolete or they can be validated in such a way that they can be more useful now. This is part of what we intend to do.
From the 20th century, intensive agriculture increased productivity. Nigerian farmers have often relied on shifting cultivation, which is a system in which forests are burnt, releasing nutrients to support cultivation of annual and then perennial crops for a period of several years. The plot is then left fallow to regrow forest, and the farmers move to a new plot, returning after many more years, in some cases as much as 10 to 20. Unfortunately, this system may no longer be sustainable because this fallow period is shortened if population density grows, requiring the input of nutrients like fertilizer and manure and some manual pest control. Annual cultivation is therefore the next phase of intensity in which there is no fallow period. This requires even greater nutrient and pest control inputs. Further industrialization led to the use of monocultures. Because of the low biodiversity, nutrient use is uniform and pests tend to build up, necessitating greater use of pesticides and fertilizers. Multiple cropping, in which several crops are grown sequentially in one year, and intercropping, when several crops are grown at the same time, are other kinds of annual cropping systems known as polycultures. As the demand for food increases with a growing population, the complexity of techniques as well as outputs must increase along with the demand to keep starvation away. It is this application of modern techniques that have often proved a challenge for Nigerian farmers.
The quality of our products is often hampered by the tendency within to cut corners. Many of our food products may be rejected when we export them.
In 2016, the European Union rejected some Nigerian exported food products for failing to meet the required standards. Michel Arion, the head of the EU delegation to Nigeria at the time, explained that dry beans from Nigeria were banned because of the harmful levels of pesticides found in the food product. Arion recalled that over time, the EU had had cause to reject 5 other food products: palm oil, sesame seed, melon seeds, groundnuts, and smoked fish for the same reason. The EU ambassador said the action was not meant to protect the EU market, but the health and lives of Nigerian consumers in the diaspora, since all the food products exported from Nigeria to the EU market were meant for Nigerians and other African consumers.
We don't pay attention in terms of quality, standardization. The World Trade Organization have requirements. For example, the sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Your product must meet those requirements if you want to export them. there is great abuse in this country today of agrochemicals, indiscriminate use of pesticides and other agrochemicals. Now, these chemicals are used worldwide. Indeed, without chemicals, we can't get the quantity of food that we will need to meet global food requirements. But in using these chemicals, there is the chemicals are regulated. In other words, if you use a pesticide to control, say, insect infestation, there is a level of the pesticide that will remain in food that must not exceed a particular level.
It's so painful that Nigeria, I remember about 2 years or 3 years ago, there was this issue that some massive, consignment of some of our agri-produce were rejected for export. And that they did not meet what? Whether it's WTO, whichever export standards. And most of these export standards require injection of science and technology.
Where will the solutions to these problems come from?
The products of their research can be commercialized. That really is the problem. It's not that we don't have the indigenous knowledge of transforming these products, but the fact is that we must realize that we are also competing globally. And as long as we depend on food importation, I think prior to COVID, this country must be spending close to $10 billion annually importing foods. And many of these foods we can produce locally. But if we produce them, the products may even turn out to be more expensive than the imported products, again because of the issue of economies of scale. So the real thing to do is to encourage this type of intervention that TETFund is doing, so that gradually we begin really to develop the local capacity to produce, in my own area, these food products. The food multinationals should be encouraged to work with the universities so that the products that are developed by the universities are taken up by the food multinationals and promoted. Because at times, it's just really the marketing that makes the difference. But if we work towards this kind of intervention that the TETFund is promoting.
Perhaps the most exciting prospect of the work TETFund is doing, besides food security, is the provision of jobs for Nigeria's teeming youths. Over 1/3 of the world's workers are employed in agriculture, second only to the service sector. This will prove extremely useful to Nigeria, despite the fact that in recent decades, the global trend of decreasing number of agricultural workers continues, especially in developing countries where smallholding is being overtaken by industrial agriculture and mechanization. Creating sustainable food systems which provide food security with sustainable agriculture practices is an international policy priority that is articulated in Sustainable Development Goal number 2. Zero hunger, adopted by the United Nations in 2015. It is also one of the thematic areas of TETFund's Research and Development Standing Committee.
What is different now that is happening is that TETFund has broadened the scope. And if you look at the people, the academicians and personalities that have been put together under this standing committee for research and development, it cuts across the entire spectrum of the economy. And we need to look at a basic framework that will be used to build the building blocks. Even if we're asking for increased funding, there must be a basis for that. And so what this group is doing is looking at who are even the stakeholders that we are talking about. What are the institutions that we are talking about in terms of R&D, both within the public sector and the private sector? And then we look at the quality of infrastructure that is available. And so we can aggregate that to see how we can now justify what kind of funds that are needed to really revitalize research and innovation.
The main goal of TETFund's interventions in agriculture is to aggregate research and innovations from the enhancement of value addition through science and technology towards improvement of food nutrition, security for health, poverty reduction, improved national resources, and the attainment of global competitiveness. And that is the paradigm shift.